Well, for our Porsche and VW conversions, if you've ever watched our channel or seen any of our conversions, we use a component mounting board. This is 3/16 marine grade aluminum, and it will go, in this particular case, right here up against the top right there. I don't know if you can see on the camera, my hand is probably in the way. Let me move over. But it clears the height of the transaxle, and so it will clear the height of our adapter plate. And we don't mount it directly to the firewall. We actually space them out with a spacer, and I just have the washers already connected and bolts everything on this, but we use this spacer. So it will be spaced out from the firewall yay far. I think this is 1.5 inches or something. That allows for our component board to operate as both a component mounting board and a heat sink. Believe it or not, the main contactors do get hot, and the inverters were using a cooling system, but this just helps keeps things cool. It gives us a good mounting point, and you'll see as we go ahead how we do that. So we'll have the aluminum mounting board across the center. It will hold our throttle, the inverter, our main contactor, and the shunt. And then we'll have some side panels that'll be ABS on either side. We typically go on the right side. We're going to have our cooling system. So we'll have our radiator, or not our radiator, our reservoir, coolant reservoir on the right side, and then on the left side we'll have some electronics. We'll have our relays, the KSI relay, our reverse relay, our reverse lights relay, some terminal strips, and because we're going to have all the wiring that comes from the vehicle, like the 12 volts switched and unswitched, and the wiring that's coming from the front, either from the dash or all the way from the front, and that will come to a terminal strip. And then from that terminal strip, then it will go to our board. The terminal strip will be on the ABS, which can be separated. Everything's very modular, so we can change any or all components very quickly and easily. And that's how we do it. So anyway, just wanted to explain to you, what I'm doing and how I'm going to do it. So the next thing I will do is I will decide where I'm going to put those standoffs and mount those, and then take my measurements and drill the holes on my component mounting board, and then that would be able to mount in place. And then I will cut and mount the little side panels, ABS panels. All the components that are mounted on our component board are done so on the workbench. So this modular setup also allows for that type of thing, where we have the convenience of not having to work here on the car, but standing at the workbench, and we can do everything bang, bang, bang. Same with those side panels. Everything is done, and then they're bolted in the vehicle. Makes for a very quick, easy, simple, and that's the way we like it. Now there is a sequential aspect, to the big picture of doing a conversion. So, having some insights will save you some time and energy. So one of the things is that on the other side of this firewall, we're going to have a rear battery pack. And so the rear battery pack is going to be mounted both to this firewall and to the floor, and they will be strapped. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. We've shown it in other videos that these things are strapped in so that it's not just a bolt and a washer. So anyway, what happens is that the component board is not as wide as the battery box is. So we're going to put the component board in first, because once we put the battery box in, we won't be able to get to those bolts on that side. The battery box would be in the way. And so first the component board, then the battery box. And then when the battery box is done, it's wide enough that we don't have anything in the way. We don't have any issues with things being in our way. So that's just, whatever you're doing, think about the entire process, because there's lots of that type of thing. This is just one example, but there's, cases where you need to do it in a certain sequence, and if you don't, you may be taking things back out, redoing it kind of thing. This is what the component board looks like when it's mounted in place. Here's what it looks like on the other side. So, like I mentioned, the battery box will be back here, but it's longer. It'll go about here. And so they don't interfere, and the battery box is actually set off far enough to clear those bolt heads. And then the battery box only comes out about yay far, so it's not, doesn't come all the way out to the edge of that shelf anyway. So anyway, that's what that looks like. The next step will be to add the cut the ABS boards that will match this and go over to here, so between here and here, and they actually mount to the board. So we drill and tap this board, and that ABS side panel actually bolts directly to our component board, and it's the same on both sides. And I mentioned what we mount on those, but anyway, that's what we'll do next. We'll measure, the overlap and how far out. We know this is 12 inches high or tall, and so then we'll cut those side boards and mount them. That allows us then to be able to start mounting the components on those boards. We can mount components on the component board too, and we can make a mark and see where our throttle cable is going to come. So we can mount our little pulley we put on here. We can mount the throttle then. We can mount the shunt. We can't mount the main contactor or the controller because we don't have those items yet. But we can still put, we know where they're going to go. We know the specs on them. So we can already drill the holes and have all that mounting ready to go beforehand. So this is the general layout that we're going to have for our component board. The only thing that's missing is our main contactor, and that will go up in this area around here. So you have your battery pack lines coming into your shunt, into your main contactor, and then from there to the controller. This is the side where we'll have all of our relays and terminal strips. This side, of course, is our coolant reservoir, and the way it's configured right now is not the way that we'll have it configured. Excuse me. That's just the way it came out of the box. So anyway, we need to drill and tap the holes for our side panels. There's mountings to do here and so forth. This is just an old inverter that we use for a template, And so, yeah, this is the basic layout. You can check, other videos that we've produced to see, how they turn out, what they look like. You'll see this one after it's completed. I'm not going to bore you. Like I said, we've done this many times before. Just, we were talking about it. We saw it in the vehicle. Just wanted to give you an idea of what we do next. As I mentioned previously, the Volkswagen thing doesn't have really, a dash area that you can access easily. I mean, these panels, there's a screw here, same way on the center one, and they hinge downward, and so that gives you a little bit of room. But there's there's the stock wiring and stuff back there, and it's just not a convenient place to, so you can see what it looks like. Fuse block is on this side. It's just not a convenient place to add things. Take a look at the center one here. Now we did add, there's a hose that goes up through here for the defrost. Goes from here, we've removed it up, but we've added this terminal strip, and that will be the termination point for wires that we have coming from the rear of the car to the front, and all the stuff from the front to under the bonnet. This is kind of that common juncture right here to connect everything in the front and front to rear. But then we can get to that right here from the bottom without having to hinge this piece down. There's just, once you have that hose in there, there's just not a lot of room to add or mount anything. And so, and you can see, as the radio, it's added under the dash. They just don't have, lend themselves well to adding something to the dash. We've had them where they've had holes cut out right there already for instrumentation, and we'll repurpose those. But in this case, I don't like, drilling a bunch of holes, especially where they can be seen. And so we're not touching the dash. The two switches that we added, like I said, there were already blanks in those holes. They were holes there with a cover on them. We just took out the little cover and inserted our two little lights and switches. So why am I saying all this? Give you the shot in under here. You've seen it before, but that's the back side of the dash. So, you either mount something there or in those other two little spots. What we choose to do is make the conversion modular, in that it is only going to have the vehicle and then the conversion. And so the conversion stuff is being added to it, and it could be removed if you wanted it to be. And so we try to have minimal impact on the vehicle as a whole. So let me show you what we do with the things. So what we do is, under the bonnet there will be the charger, the traction pack charger, the front battery box, and two of these boxes. And so one will be the mounting point and junction, electrical junction box for your J1772 charge port. The other one is going to house some components, and it's going to be a mounting point for our main disconnect. And you can see photos from others that we've done. So we're just going to show you this one at the moment. We're going to have a couple terminal strips that'll be on the outside, and so everything that will be inside this box, the AVC2 and some relays, will all be wired to the terminal strip, and from the terminal strip to that front terminal strip. So that's, you disconnect from the terminal strips, and this can be removed, and no one's the wiser. If you need to do any inspection or anything, you could easily remove this cover and inspect the components inside, or you can just, using a test instrument, you can check the terminal strips and never have to open it up. The other item is already mounted in here, and that is our pack, traction pack fuse. This is the front of the vehicle. We're looking, front towards the dash, going that way, away from us. And so the on top here will be our main disconnect. The power's going to come right out of the battery box, not even a foot, comes out, goes through our switch, and from there it goes to the back to our main contactor. The other side of the front battery box will come out, go into this box, through the fuse, and back to the rear battery box. Comes out of the rear battery box and goes to the shunt. So we're going to mount these other items in here, and this will be mounted on top, and then this gets mounted in the vehicle. And the way that is, then, we're only have 2 holes to mount all these components. 2 holes in the vehicle, that's it. So that's one of the reasons why we do this. The other, like I said, I just like the modularity of things. It makes things easy to repair, replace, troubleshoot, all of that. So we've already drilled all the holes and have everything ready to be mounted. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount all those things in place, let you see a quick shot of how everything fits in there, and then we'll wire it up and give you another shot. Well, this is the item assembled. Where the lines come out from the fuse. One terminal strip, the other terminal strip. This is where the wires that go from the components inside to the terminal strips comes out that hole, and of course our main disconnect on top. Remove the cover, and we can see the items that we have inside. Just a couple relays, the AVC2 and our traction pack fuse. So next, I'll wire these and let you see what it looks like once it's been wired. Here it is, assembled and wired, sitting on the workbench, not installed in the vehicle, of course. And so we have a disconnect switch on top, and then the components wired up on the inside, with the exception of the fuse, which will be done later on when we're running the traction pack cabling. But all those components, the wiring's transferred out here to terminal strips, which will allow us to connect these to either the dash, instrumentation, controls, to the controller, wiring harness, or whatever the case may be. We can install this in the car now. This part's done, and we can connect to it quickly and easily. Everything's identified already. Actually, it sits like this. And so that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to go bolt it in the vehicle. I can screw this top down now. And yeah, we will remove this again, because this has to be removed to put the cabling on. But that's going to be a while down the road. We're waiting on our battery boxes. And so once we have those, then we'll start running the traction pack cable. But till then, we just have this snugged in place so that it doesn't walk away. Well, here's that component box mounted in the vehicle. Now, the battery box is going to sit up about here. So it's going to cover most of that. You really won't see the box, but you will see the disconnect switch, which is kind of the idea. And then the J1772 charge port, it's going to go on the other side right here. And the cabling goes down here. Traction pack cabling and our control cabling goes there. And then the dash, that's what's going into the rear. Dash cabling goes there. So all of that's ready to go. I'm going to do the J1772 next and mount that, because the pilot and proximity lines run across over to back terminal strip here, and then I'll run the wires from here to wherever they're to go. Well, that terminal strip that I showed you under the center of the dash there, that's where everything will go from here, and then to the gauges and whatever. Well, let me show you what we've done on the dash so far. And that is, we talked about earlier, we identified our unswitched 12 volts and switched 12 volts. And we added the terminal strip under here. The wires running across were existing wires. They run over here to the stereo system. We're waiting on the Curtis 840 display that comes with your motor inverter package, and as we've mentioned before, we're waiting on that still. So that's where that will go, and that's one little wire loom that comes to that gauge, and so that'll fill that blank. But we've wired this up, and it goes to switch to 12 volts, so whenever we turn on the ignition, it comes on. And then, of course, ground, and then there's a dash light. And so we just, easy to do on the VWs, you can just connect to one of the existing dash lights. We just piggyback on that. And so we have our system on light, and we've got our reverse. So let me turn on the ignition. We'll watch the 12 volt gauge come alive. So the 12 volt gauge is registering. We have our green system on light, and when I press the switch right here, that gives us reverse. So that will be our electronic reverse. And of course, we've tested all these things to our terminal strip termination right here, so those things like the reverse switch will connect there with our wiring that goes to the back. And anything, you know, back and front that needs ignition, well, not the back, we actually have a separate ignition source we're pulling off back there. A wire that went to the ignition for the engine that's no longer there, so we're using that. But for any ignition stuff that goes in the front here, we've got a place on that terminal strip. So that's what we've done so far. Didn't film it because it's just not really conducive to filming. The things are kind of difficult to work in because you've got this high, you know, threshold right here, and so they're just not comfortable. Steering wheel, brake, stick shift, everything's in the way as you're trying to bend over and get in this one little spot right here. So, but anyway, next what we're going to do is the JLD 404, which monitors our battery. You can see there was a little like bracket thing that was here. I'm not exactly sure what that's for, Can't think of anything off the top of my head, but we put a piece of ABS, which is going to be what we mount to. So again, didn't have to drill any holes, we just mounted to something that was existing. So that's what's next in the wires that run from the JLD 404, which is much more than what we've done so far, a lot more wiring from that gauge. And so we'll do that next. Let's talk about the JLD 404. It's just a simple little instrument here. It has three functions that it displays, and that's going to be amps, volts, and amp hours. And we can program this thing to be compatible with different shunts and different voltage systems. Then the other thing that is nice about this, and we've done videos just on this, how to program it, on and on and on, but just for the sake of this little video series, this, like I said, monitors our traction pack, volts, amps, amp hours, and it also has two built-in programmable relays, J1 and J2. And so we're going to connect to those. One's going to perform our low voltage shutoff, and the other is going to be a redundancy for our charger shutoff. So the connections to the JLD 404 will be as followed. There's the two relay connections. They're single pole double throw relays. Like I said, they're programmable. We can program an upper and lower threshold for both of those. So we're going to have 4 wires that will just be for the two relays. We're going to have one of the common of each one, and then one to either normally open or normally closed. The other connections to it, and of course these are all screw terminal connections here, are our 12 volts positive and negative, our traction pack voltage in this case it's, you've got up to 100 volts and up to 500 volts. Well, we're over 100 and below 500, so we'd be going to terminal number 5. And then we've got our shunt connections. We're going to use the common and the 75 millivolt. And you can learn more about these things in our previous videos. So we're going to have 2, 4, 5, and the other 4. So 9 wires will be going from this instrument. So those 9 wires are what we're going to do next. We're going to connect those and have this thing ready to install in place.